If America is comprised of 50 laboratories of democracy, as Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis observed, Illinois is the meth lab. There are certain states where movement Marxists are so ensconced in the halls of power that they can safely experiment with the next stages of their revolution without fear of political reprisal. Well, the Walter Whites of Illinois have put on their lab coats and safety goggles. In Evanston, Illinois, home to Northwestern University, a long-standing incubator of movement Marxists, the city council is moving to allow so-called documented residents, who are not U.S. citizens, vote in local elections. The sponsor of the measure, an alderman named Devin Reed, said this, I'm quoting, "I believe it has been the march of our nation to allow more and more folks the right to vote in our elections," unquote. More and more folks, regardless of their citizenship or status. Alderman Reed continued, quote, "I think that folks who are members of our community, who are documented legal residents, but not quite citizens yet, who are paying taxes, their kids are going to our schools, should have the right to participate in our local democracy," end quote. Not quite citizens. Missed it by that much, pardon my Maxwell smart. But hey, close enough. You know who else's kids are going to our schools, have permits to work, and are paying taxes? People without documents, other than perhaps in some cases a court date for their asylum application. If having documents is close enough to being a citizen, then why wouldn't being here without documents be close enough to being here with them? One more pearl from the Honorable Alderman Reed of Evanston. Quote, "Election reform should be about making sure more voters and more voices are heard in order to then affect the outcome," end quote. As I was saying, the goal is more voters and more voices. If so, there's no reason to get hung up on technicalities like documents and status when there's no desire to distinguish between citizen and non-citizens when it comes to rights and benefits, is there? In fact, why not allow people in America, for whatever reason, and by whatever means, to vote anywhere they want? This is not a unique development, what's happening in Evanston. Other localities like Washington, D.C. and San Francisco have previously instituted voting for non-citizens in local elections, and more than a dozen states provide no prohibition for communities in their states to do the same. In fact, legislation was introduced in Illinois 2 years ago to allow non-citizens to vote in school board elections statewide. What's unique to Evanston's play is the timing. Seize this window of open borders opportunity to pad the voter rolls and propel this effort the same way as was done with sanctuary city resolutions. Understand something else. This is not part of some long run-up to an election cycle sometime in the distant future. This is the answer to the question, why is the Democrat Party willing to take on so much political water rather than slow the flow at the border? Why choose to be on defense doing damage control on stories that make national news, like the 2 cops being beaten up by a gang of seemingly unrepentant so-called asylum seekers? As an aside, I'd love to hear their asylum arguments. We're so afraid of state persecution in our home country, we came to America to batter police officers. Real persuasive. But anyway, as to why Democrats take these electoral risks in an election year, the most important in our country's history, they say, perhaps it's because they have plans to end-run the opinions of American citizens with the fealty of non-citizens. In a recent memo on the topic, preeminent election attorney Cleta Mitchell reminded the Republican Party of the reality of the legalities that shape our electoral landscape. The upshot is that while federal law prohibits non-citizens from voting, the National Voter Registration Act, combined with Supreme Court precedents on that statute, along with state-level voter registration infrastructure, make our elections quite vulnerable to non-citizens voting. Let me read one passage from the memo to frame this. Quoting Cleta Mitchell, "The Supreme Court has ruled that states may not require documentary proof of citizenship in order to vote in a federal election, citing the requirement in the National Voter Registration Act that states must accept the federal registration form for purposes of registering to vote, and there's no language in the NVRA, that act, to require such documentation." Continuing, "Accordingly, the only protection against illegals voting is a signature attestation that the person registering is a citizen, which SCOTUS has deemed sufficient." The Biden administration has ordered every federal agency to register everyone who comes into contact with the agency. So, Cleta Mitchell asks, what protections exist to stop the registration of migrants by the Department of Homeland Security? In addition, there are myriad left-wing advocacy groups who register illegals to vote. But wait, there's more pools of potential illegal voters. Cleta Mitchell continues. Many states, such as North Carolina and Wisconsin, allow the use of student IDs for voting purposes. Foreign students are issued student IDs, thus creating another pool of potential illegals voting. Wait, still more. Again, back to Cleta Mitchell. The federal statute governing overseas and military voting also does not require proof of citizenship in order to register and cast a vote from overseas. The Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act allows persons to essentially register and vote by mail without a residence in the United States and without any proof of citizenship. The program was intended to facilitate military personnel and their families in voting while deployed. However, in 2020, under this law, 63% of the vote was civilian. So the failure to require proof of citizenship here creates yet another pool of potential non-citizen voting. Mitchell also offers prescriptions for reforming the laws in question, financial penalties for states to have found allowing non-citizens to vote illegally and the like. If this isn't the Democrats' plan to save democracy from the people, what else would explain their cavalier attitude to the political pounding they're taking? This isn't an invasion, it's an importation. If it is indeed their plan, congressional Republicans, Republican governors, and Trump himself better start laying this out for the American people, the legally eligible voters, remember them, and moving in earnest along the lines proposed by Cleta Mitchell. I'm Dan Proft with a counterculture commentary. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and please leave a comment in the comment section. We'd love to hear your thoughts.